Hey everyone, it's Louise and Kingsley from BSW Connect and RWK Accountancy, and we're coming to you about JobKeeper today. You might have seen in the media that there is a lot of talk about JobKeeper being cut off in September and a lot of panic that it could go sooner. So we've got Kingsley here to talk about it all for us. So Kingsley, tell me what's happening in JobKeeper.
Well, the key issue, although the Prime Minister and Treasurer have pretty much said there will be some sort of extension of the JobKeeper program, I'd imagine it'll probably be a lot harder to get post-September. But the key issue is probably for the vast majority of businesses, JobKeeper will finish at the end of September, and that also coincides for most people probably when your rent relief's been organised with your landlord, and possibly you've also done the debt relief on your repayments with the bank. So you could find that suddenly all of those things are ending pretty much at the same time. So if your business hasn't got itself back to being cash flow positive without having those things going forward, you've obviously got a big problem. And then the second problem, I suppose, too, is that you might have checked your numbers and seen that you're okay if that happens on how you're going currently, but because that's happening for everybody, you might find a bunch of your customers suddenly find it very hard, or people are laying off staff because JobKeeper's finished and your sales goes down.
So let's talk about labour costs, because some businesses have their labour costs almost completely covered by JobKeeper at the moment. So they kind of feel like they may be okay, but what's that going to look like when JobKeeper runs out?
Yeah, they're probably the ones that are most exposed, Louise, for that very reason, that at the moment, of course, they're in this sort of unreal world where they're getting effectively free labour, or near enough to. So if you've got a workforce where most or a big number of your employees were earning around about that $1,500 a fortnight, and now the government's pretty much paying all of that, or possibly even a bit more, then at this moment you're getting a free workforce, and that's going to come to an end of September.
So what can people do about that? Because there could also be a drop in sales as a result of people not having JobKeeper anymore, and so not having this little cash boost influx right now.
Yeah. So what we are recommending people to do is, now that most people have had JobKeeper for a month or two, if you've got in at the front end of the program, and you've probably got enough data to get a bit of an idea about how you're going with those figures. So you should be able to do a little bit of reasonably accurate sort of modelling scenarios to see how things go. So we'd be saying, well, number one, let's assume you have the same sort of sales you're getting around about now, with everybody getting a JobKeeper. Just take JobKeeper out now and just see where does that leave you. Now that I'm having to pay all my wages myself, the government's not helping, am I still cash flow positive? Yes, that's great. So that's one scenario, but don't forget, as we said, because this is happening to everybody pretty much at the same time, your sales might drop. So yeah, you might look okay on current sales, but what if your sales drop 10%, 20%, who knows, maybe even 50%, depending what business you're in, and running through your figures to see what they look like. So most people typically would do a spreadsheet that enables them to make those changes very quickly and easily, to see what each one of those looks like. Then depending what comes out of that spreadsheet is whether you've got to do major surgery or whether it's something fairly mild, and take it from there, basically.
And we talked about just a second ago that basically all your debt holidays are going to end. So your rent relief, your hold on your mortgages, this is going to be pretty big for some people. What should people do in terms of the rent relief ending, the commercial tenancies, the changes that are happening there? What should people do?
Certainly, I think if you've had a fairly cooperative and helpful landlord, not everyone has, but if you have got a pretty good relationship with your landlord, I think if you've gone and done this exercise of doing some scenarios, and you say, well, gee, I might have a bit of a problem, I think you are better off alerting your landlord to that early, because effectively they're a business of sorts themselves. They may well have had to have been in conversation with their bank about debt relief and so forth, because you haven't been paying all of your rent under the agreements you've struck. And it just puts them in a better position to be able to help you too, that if they then be able to, because the banks have said they might give another 4 months extension. So again, from their point of view, if they're going to their bank manager earlier because you've spoken to them, it all goes down the chain. Everyone looks organised and well planned out, as opposed to unorganised and panicked. You'll probably get a good outcome, as will they.
And should you be giving your, landlord, real estate agent, should you be giving them some of your cash flow projections or past cash flow sort of things, so that they can get a really good idea as to where your business is going to be able to assist you?
Again, probably depending a bit on the relationship you've got with your commercial landlord. So for those people that have a pretty good, sensible relationship, I can't see that doing too much harm. I guess you need to be mindful in that equation, if you've got a landlord you're not so confident and trustworthy around, is that puts them into some position to sort of probably extrapolate what you might make ordinarily or something like that in good times. And so when you're coming up for your normal rent review, that might be in 2 years' time or something or other, you possibly have given them quite useful information as to what sort of rent increase you could bear. So with a more devious landlord, you might find that they sort of go for a higher rent increase than they otherwise would have. It shouldn't be too much of a problem, as most leases, of course, are structured around market increases, CPI, these sorts of things. But I'd just be a little bit mindful around it. But if you have got a good, sensible commercial relationship with your landlord, then quite possibly you've already done this exercise with them in terms of getting your existing sort of COVID rent reduction. And again, that should help them. One, have some faith in what you're telling them, and probably also even help them in terms of their negotiations, possibly with a bank manager or whatever as well.
Let's talk about the rise and the fall of the costs and the revenue. And, it is a part of the nature of the beast of business and being in business. Things do go up, go down. Obviously, things could be a bit more sharper this year. What sort of scenarios do people need to look out for?
So I guess the key ones are obviously where it's clear that you will not be cash flow positive, and possibly not then meeting debt repayments, existing rents and whatever else. So you are going to have to do some things. And I guess, unfortunately, for most businesses, labour is often either the biggest cost or one of. So the hardest part in these sorts of things is probably facing facts that maybe you may have to let some of your staff go once JobKeeper comes to an end. That's obviously about the worst thing you have to deal with in business, where you're having to let someone know they've lost their job. But again, far better perhaps to have let 2 staff members go than for, say, 5 or 6 people to lose their jobs, including yourself and perhaps your family home. And likewise, if your business survives because of doing that, hopefully you can go back to those 2 people and give them their job back in a not too distant future. If you've gone broke, you won't be giving anyone a job, let alone yourself. So it is that sort of very tough sort of stuff where you might have to let 2 go to save 5 type scenario. Some of your costs and so forth, of course, are going to naturally fall. If you're selling goods, if your business has wound back 20%, well, you're going to be buying 20% less goods. Probably just watch where you are on your margins, because if things have got tough for everyone, that's another assumption that could catch you out, that not only are you selling less actual units of whatever you sell, but perhaps you're getting less of a sale price for it as well. Another thing to watch out for. But hopefully a lot of costs will sort of fairly naturally solve themselves, and then it's more those labour ones and the overheady ones that are harder to deal with, that you're going to have a real good hard look at.
So let's talk about that employee, the labour costs that exist there. What about what do people need to be mindful of if they are starting to think, well, I might need to let some staff go? what sort of entitlements might actually be more costly than the activity they think it is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's, of course, is coming out in the financial press over the last week or so is the fact that with people on JobKeeper, they are still accruing their leave. And where a lot of people get caught out in a turnaround survival type task of a business is that you'll find, if you say, here's an employee that I don't think we can keep on the books anymore, they cost us $1,000 a week for argument's sake. And so we're like, okay, if we get rid of Bob, that's $1,000 out of our cost structure, you beauty. But you'll then have to pay out all their leave entitlements, which at that point may well be $5,000 or something like that they've clocked up with leave and so forth. And so in actual fact, initially it makes your cash flow position harder, not easier. And this is where people talk about the time it takes to turn the ship around in these scenarios. So again, that's why doing these scenarios is so important, that you know that now, 90 to 120 days before you have to do it, that's what will happen. And so you have made the precautions ready for that, not discover that the very, very hard way.
And, you know, what should people do right now, and who can they go and see to get the help to work these things through? So I know we've talked about stress testing your finances and taking out your JobKeeper and working out your cash flow, but what else can people do right now, and who do they need to go and see?
Well, in terms of, you may well have the capacity to do some of this sort of spreadsheeting yourself. Otherwise, if you're not so all far with that, but I guess it will be in terms of people like myself being accountants that can help you. Likewise, obviously talking to your bank manager or whatever's coming out of that, and as we discussed, potentially also with your landlord. On the HR front, I mean, that can be quite complex and a real legal minefield. So again, we have at BSW HR people we can recommend you talk to. Outside of that, that probably covers most of the boxes that you likely confront, I think, to deal with the issue.
Perfect. So guys, we just want to touch on that, you know, the stimulus stuff is all ending at the same time. It is all just right now for September. There are some other things being talked about. There's one called, I want to say it's called Job Maker, or something that's around trades and apprenticeships that was being announced this week. So we'll keep you guys up to date with what's happening with those when we receive that information. And look, if there's any questions you have, just drop us a note and we will happily jump on and record a little video like this for you to get your answers. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Kingsley, for your time.
Thank you, Louise.